Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Beor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of the world's greatest knowledge. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of hundreds available as free downloads, podcasts, or transcriptions. Our lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. We invite you to browse our library of lectures to find teachings that suit you. Twice a month, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live and includes a free online classroom allowing listeners to see images, read related scriptures, and ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate, visit gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is a service of Glorian Publishing, a non-profit organization. The lectures and radio broadcasts have been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Most spiritual schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. To make a donation, visit gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
Today we'll continue our course about the Bhavachakra, which is one of the central symbolic forms in esoteric Buddhism. The Bhavachakra is usually referred to as the Wheel of Samsara, but as we've explained through this course, that term is not accurate. The word Bhavachakra means wheel of becoming. So this wheel symbolizes how all things move through cycles in nature. The word bhava means becoming. It also means a state of being. So as we've explained in this course, we have our own bhava. And this state of being, or level of being, is constantly changing in accordance with our behavior. Not our intentions, not our wishes, not even our prayer. But our state of being, our level of being, changes according to how we act. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. Every atom of energy that we utilize in each moment is putting in motion our own wheel. The wheel of our mind. The wheel of our consciousness. So we ourselves are a Bhavachakra. And this is our fundamental interest in the symbol. In the previous two lectures, we described for you three fundamental factors that help us to direct the spinning of that wheel, the movement of that wheel. In other words, the movement of our psyche. Those three factors are really one factor. They are united. They are the synthesis of our behavior. The first of the three that we discussed was sacrifice. The second was birth. Today we'll talk about death. But the death we're going to describe is not physical death. Physical death, in the perspective of the bigger picture, is no more important than when we go to sleep at night. From the big picture, when we go to sleep at night, it's just a little mark along the long trajectory of our experience. And when you have a wider perspective of the course of your life, you realize that each death that you experienced is exactly the same. It is a change from one experience to another. It is an ending and it is a beginning. Physically speaking, death is important in the context that it provides a doorway that you can utilize if you know how. And that's why last year we gave a course about death physically. Today's lecture is about death psychologically, which is more important. Psychological death or mystical death is far more impactful on the trajectory of your own consciousness and your experience of being alive than physical death is. Physical death is a change of state, physically. Psychological death is a change of state spiritually, psychologically. This is why it's more important. In the Christian Bible, in the New Testament, it says in Corinthians, that which thou sowest is not quickened except it die. This statement underscores how important the factor of death is in our spirituality. And it underscores how mistaken modern so-called spiritual people have become, because all of them steadfastly avoid the subject of death. People nowadays in religion and spirituality are very uncomfortable with the notion of death and completely avoid it. When the truth is, death itself is the door of liberation. Of the three factors, which I remind you are one, the aspect of spiritual work that is most impactful on our experience from moment to moment is the factor of death. Unfortunately, most spiritual groups focus on service or sacrifice, or on birth, on having ecstasy, on having great emotional highs, without realizing that those experiences are impossible if the death does not occur first. The death of the old, the death of the impure, the death of the lie. So this statement provides us a theme within which we can explore this Bhavachakra. So the wheel of becoming is symbolized in Buddhism as a great cosmic structure in the grip of a terrifying being. And as we've mentioned, most groups study this at the most superficial level as how it relates to physical or interdimensional existence. And this level of importance is useful. It applies. It is necessary to know it. But if you really want change, if you want liberation from suffering, if you want to know something about reality, you have to understand the Bhavachakra is your own mind. It is your state of being right now. Your state of experience is mapped on this symbol. So all of the previous lectures we've given have explained the many details of that. Today we're going to focus on that creature who holds the wheel. His name is Yama. He looks quite terrifying, depicted in a wrathful form, with fangs and claws, and 3 all-seeing eyes, and 5 skulls upon his crown. In his grip is the whole of Maya, the phenomenal world, manifested existence. And in that cycling of all manifested things, we find all the beings the gods, the demigods, the humans, the animals, the hungry spirits, and those trapped in the hell realms. So that's externally. Internally, these 6 realms represent 6 aspects of our own psyche. 6 different types of psychological phenomena that are constantly unfolding and vying for supremacy within us. Psychologically speaking, we are a chaos. We constantly are contradicting ourselves. From one moment to the next, different psychological entities attempt to take control of this wheel and turn it to their own advantage. In some moments, it is entities defined by a strong sense of pride. Me, I deserve, I want, I am. A sense of self defined by the comparison with others. And that sense of self feels inferior or superior, depending on its own idiosyncrasy. Pride and shame. Vanity. Pride corresponds to the level of the so-called gods, those who consider themselves superior, those who consider themselves powerful. And all of us have those entities that emerge in different ways, at different times in our experience from day to day. Similarly, through all these other realms, we find entities of anger, envy, lust, fear, resentment, gluttony, greed, jealousy. We have an uncountable number of different eyes, different kleshas, samskaras, aggregates, defects, egos. Different elements in our psyche that feel like me, that have different emotions and different thoughts and different impulses to act. Sometimes they seem quite beneficial, quite loving, quite humble, when secretly they're deeply envious or seeking revenge. So our bhava, our state of being, is extremely subjective, deeply asleep, lacking any real perception of the truth. We don't know ourselves. We think we do. We think that we're awake. We think we know what we are and who we are, when in fact the totality of our sense of self is a self-propagated lie. An illusion that we ourselves have made, built out of our traumas and desires. And we fight tooth and nail to protect it. We can't imagine what would happen were we to lose it. This causes an unimaginable terror in us. When we encounter the genuine Dharma, the teachings that state that ego must die. That sense of self is the cause of suffering for you and for those you love. It must die. And when we see that, we face that, we run in terror. We don't know anything else. We know our cage. We know our little name and our little history and our set of resentments and our long list of grievances. But we don't know the truth. We don't know who we really are. We can scarcely remember what happened last week or last month. We have no clue about our previous existences. We have no concept of who our real being is, our true inner being, which is utterly without pride, completely without anger, absolutely free of doubt and fear. It is pure serenity and a deep, abiding love. But we've become so encaged in our fear, in pride, in lust, we can't even imagine life outside of the cage. And when someone shows us how to break the lock, we say, no. I'm just going to hang different pictures on the walls of my cage. I don't want out. The real Dharma teaches us how to break the cage, to shatter it. But it takes courage. A lot of courage. It is not easy. To break the cage requires very specific training, very specific knowledge, and a great deal of willpower. Primarily, it requires someone who can be self-reliant. Someone who can put these three factors in motion in themselves continually from moment to moment. A school cannot do that for you. A master cannot do that for you. No God can do that for you. The Buddha himself cannot pull you out of hell. Only you can pull yourself out. That requires knowing how to put these three factors united in motion, continually, without stopping, so that your continual experience, your continual bhava, is moving out, not deeper, moving up towards freedom, right now, constantly. To do that requires a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-awareness, a lot of caution, and a lot of energy. So that creature who holds the wheel, if the wheel is us, the creature must be us too. Yama, in Sanskrit, is actually the inverse of the word Maya. Most people who've studied yoga or Hinduism or Buddhism know this word Maya and interpret it immediately as illusion. We explained in the previous lectures how Maya is actually the name of the Divine Mother. She is the body of existence. She is Nut, the goddess. She is Prakriti. She is Prana. She is Tada, Maya, Maya, Mary, Isis. She is nature itself, not physical nature only, but all the dimensions, all the way to the absolute abstract space, Shunyata, the Adi Buddha. She is all of that. She is the ground from which existence emerges, and she is every particle of existence. We turn her into illusion because of the nature of our cage, the way we grasp at a false sense of self. This me, this myself, causes us to perceive incorrectly. So what we see is projected. It is illusion. It is Maya. But that's not her fault. That's our fault. So her form, if she has a form, is simply a mirror. And we see in that mirror what we have made. What we see of life is what we have made of it. Everything that we perceive through our eyes, ears, tongue, nose, touch, mind is an illusion projected by the mind itself. We can only see what we ourselves are willing to see, that we want to see. This is one of the fundamental arguments of Asian philosophy, one that's grossly misunderstood. That illusion emerges out of ourselves because of this grasping at a false identity, because of a psychological construct that we ourselves have crafted over thousands of years. This I, that in each body takes on a new personality, a new name, a new face, a new body, But nevertheless, inside of that personality is that same set of psychological traumas that continues to deepen its addiction to suffering. So we repeat these cycles again and again, always blaming others, always blaming God, always blaming our spouse, our boss, our karma, never recognizing that the spinning of the wheel is done by ourselves. So in other words, that demonic, wrathful creature that grips the wheel is us. It is our own Satan. It is our own Antichrist, the mind, which in the Bible is also called Jezebel, she who calls herself a prophetess. That is Yama, this creature with the head of a bull. He represents our own mind. Directly translated, Yama is usually said to be the god of death. So he appears in this terrifying aspect. But the word Yama itself is very, very deep meanings. The first is what I mentioned. It's the inverse of Maya. So it's the same mirror. It is Maya itself. She and he are the same thing. But interestingly, Yama also means Pluto, which in the Greek and Roman mysteries is the god of the underworld. Yama can mean crow, which in the West symbolizes death. Yama can mean restraint, curb, or rein, which in Hindu Tantra is the first stage of Patanjali's yogas. Ashtanga yoga begins with Yama, restraint of the ego. In other words, ethics. It can mean charioteer, driver, bridle, self-control, forbearance, self-restraint. So here we see that Yama has a duality. As the god of death, Yama stops life, restrains life, but also restrains bad behavior. Yama can mean one of a pair, twin or twin-born. This is a very interesting connotation when you have studied Prometheus. We gave a lecture about Prometheus and Pandora a few months back where we talked about Prometheus and his brother, twins, who both represent two faces of Lucifer, the tempter. Yama can mean the number two, couple, pair. We're going to come back to that. Tone of utterance, pitch of the voice, and key. So this term Yama, superficially, is interpreted to mean the god of death. But if you know the deeper meanings of the word, and you study any Asian scripture, whether Hindu or Buddhist, you'll discover that if you read Yama with these other meanings in mind, you will start to penetrate the actual meaning of the scripture, not just the Sunday school story, but the reason the scripture was written, which is to give clues to the psychological work. Clues not given openly, but hidden in symbols. So here we see Yama as painted in a typical Buddhist temple in the next slide. And we need to understand that Yama handles the process of death in us. Yama is part of us. In other words, we have our own Yama, our own Lord or God of death within. But that process of death, psychologically speaking, can happen in two ways. Mechanically, automatically, or intentionally. The vast majority of beings on the wheel outside of us allow the process of nature to take them automatically. And that's really probably what all of us are doing as well. we go from our moment-to-moment existence, suffering, longing for freedom, perhaps making some superficial alterations to our behavior, changing the way we dress or changing the books we read. But fundamentally, we don't change. We have the same pride, the same lust, the same envy that we've always had. We don't fundamentally change our root problems. So most of us are being handled automatically, mechanically, by nature. Meaning that that part of our innermost, our being rather, that's handling our karma, is handling it just according to the way the karma must move. Because our being doesn't have any dharma to work with. No cosmic money. No capital with which to pay our debts. So from lifetime to lifetime, we've pursued our desires endlessly. Chasing lust, chasing pride, trying to outdo each other, trying to acquire a little bit of physical comfort when suddenly it's all taken away from us and we die, we're born again, and we start the cycle again. And all along the way, each time we deepen the mechanicity, repeating the same problems, the same mistakes, repeating the same desires again and again, much as we do now from day to day. As such, over the course of many lifetimes, we've done very little for anyone but ourselves. If we analyze our lives now, we can see that's probably pretty much true. If we look at our day-to-day life from today back, we find that the vast majority of our thoughts, feelings, and actions have really been about me, myself, and I. And when we've done a little bit for someone else, it was done when it was convenient, when it was easy, or when we'd get praise or recognition, when we would get something out of it. It's rare to find a moment, even one moment, when we genuinely made a strong sacrifice for someone else at cost to ourselves. Not easy to find that. That is how we acquire Dharma, though. In the lecture Sacrifice, we explained that. To acquire cosmic capital, Dharma, the coin with which we can purchase help, liberation, we acquire that through sacrifice, through giving up our desire, through making a sacrifice of our time and energy for others. So from that point of view, we then look at the second way to die, willfully guided by skillful means. This is very difficult. To willfully die by skillful means does not happen by mere intention. It happens when you know how to do it, and you do it. Not tomorrow. Not at the retreat. Whenever that is. Once a year. Every day. So, this is important to clarify in our minds when we are analyzing our own spiritual life. To be cold and scientific when we look at our behavior and say, am I really making fundamental change in myself? Am I really conquering my lust, my pride, my envy? Or am I just fooling myself? Not easy questions to answer. Nor should they be. If you find them easy to answer, you're fooling yourself. Make no mistake. To change in this way is very difficult. But there are unmistakable ways to know when you're successful. And we'll get to that. In one tantric scripture it states, the Lord of Death resides in your own heart. Your life is being cut short by you yourself. It is you who drinks the poisonous water. With certainty, beware of this demon. This scripture is called Stages of the Heroic Mind. It comes from the tradition of Lojong, which is a Tibetan Buddhist tradition that was not available to the public till very recently. So the Lord of Death, Yama, resides in your own heart. Your life is being cut short by you yourself. This demon is yourself. Yama. So another scripture states, we all suffer in this cycle of existence. As I search down to its foundation for the root, I see the king, the thought I am, which resides in the palace of my heart in the midst of false conceptions. With whom shall I battle, for I am my own enemy? Who will save whom, for I am my own savior? I am my own witness for my actions and my inaction. I will be free when I tame my own self. This is from another scripture of the same tradition. What these scriptures point out is that the fundamental basis for psychological change is in our hands. It isn't in doing mantras. It isn't in doing pilgrimages. It's not in making big donations. Liberation is by changing psychologically. Sacrifice is necessary. Spiritual birth is necessary. But neither one can change us if we don't die as a mind, as a heart. So Yama is our own inner demon, who's not one thing, but a multiplicity, with many forms and faces. Remember, Yama is the mirror of Maya. Maya takes many forms, appears with many faces, many voices. That is our ego. That is our mind. It is completely inconsistent. It is a constant battle. It never shuts up. Anyone who's made the attempt to meditate knows well how difficult it is to tame the mind. And even if you develop some degree of concentration, you still cannot meditate. Because the mind has many levels. It is very deep. From the point of view of physicality, right now, if we look into our mind, we will hear a voice. Maybe repeating what I'm saying, or maybe responding to what I'm saying, or commenting, or trying to talk about something completely unrelated. Like, gosh, I wish I'd gotten that bagel when I had the chance. That's not your consciousness. That's an ego. Those voices in your head are not your being. They are your egos. And yet we are hypnotized by that voice, constantly chattering. All day, all night. How many human beings are making the effort to cut through that chatter, to silence it? How many can't even turn off the radio or the TV because they've become so addicted to the constant noise? I've met people who get in the car and cannot bear the silence. This is a symptom of their mind. They become so habituated to the constant chatter of their mind, they need to hear it outside too. Turn it off. Turn off the radio, turn off the TV, turn off the computer. We start to feel agitated. It's too quiet. This is why we can't meditate. We can't even tame ourselves physically, much less psychologically. So in this passage we see, as I search down to the foundation for its root, I see the king, the thought, I am, which resides in the palace of my heart in the midst of false conceptions. The king, the thought, I am. This thought, I am, is our ego. And if you become sincere about your observance of yourself, you'll find that this thought is continually manifesting in different ways. I am suffering. I am good. I am bad. I want. I need. Give me. Give me. The I am is always there. But don't mistake this I am for the real I am. The I am that Jesus taught about when he said, I am the way, the life, the truth. That is a different I am. That is the I am of the being. The being which simply is. The being does not want or lack desire. So that I am is what we need to be watching for. We need to be a witness of our actions and inactions. We need to learn to see, with whom shall I battle, for I am my own enemy. You see the question that this raises? If we accept the philosophical concept that I am Yama, I am my own god of death, I am the creator of my own suffering, I am the one turning my own Bhavachakra into hell, then how do I fight against myself? Who is fighting who? And this is the precise conflict that the beginners encounter. Who fights who? If I am so much ego, who do I fight that with? How do I fight myself? Difficult, thorny problem when we're asleep, when we don't have any vision, when we can't see clearly, either outside or inside. Who will save whom? For I am my own Savior. And yet we have the arrogance to presume that we will save humanity, that we will become great masters and bodhisattvas and we will save humanity. We can't even fight against ourselves. We want to change other people and make them better, but we can't even make ourselves better. It's a problem, but there is an answer. There is a way. We need to know about Yamantaka. Yamantaka. This image represents Yamantaka. Looks the same, right? A wrathful creature with a bull's head. Because it is the same creature. Remember I said Yama means twin? This is his twin. Yamantaka means the destroyer of Yama. He's also called Yamari, which means the enemy of Yama. Yamantaka is the antithesis of Yama. So these are both parts of ourselves. These are parts of us. Parts that we don't know about. These are symbolic forms. I'm not saying that you literally look like that. You might. I don't know. But these are symbolic images that represent something. Each part of this image is symbolic, not literal. Westerners get really freaked out by these kind of pictures because they think they're all about the devil. It is. It is about the devil, but our own devil inside. So let me explain what these symbols mean so we don't feel scared. Yama is a ferocious-looking creature with the head of a bull. If you know Egyptian mysticism, you know that Apis is the bull god. And amongst all the ancient traditions, the bull represented the being. Amongst the Minoans and the Cretans and the Greeks, amongst the Hebrews, the Jews, the Egyptians. The bull represents the Father. Keter. Amun-Ra, the highest. But unfortunately, because we've fallen into disgrace, We take all those forces that we receive from the absolute, from our innermost. We invert all that. We corrupt it. We take all of our energy and we utilize it to cause suffering for ourselves and others. We utilize it to try to feed desire, to pursue our materialistic goals. So over a long period of time, we have converted the bull apis into the bull yama. We have made it into an animal. We are animals, psychologically speaking. Truthfully, we're worse than animals. Humanity on this planet nowadays behaves worse than the animals do. Animals don't destroy their own food and water. They don't kill randomly for pleasure. They kill to eat. We kill because we like it. We rape, pillage, and steal, and destroy because we enjoy it. I know all of us in this room feel offended by that, but probably most of us have watched violent TV, video games, books, and we enjoy the entertainment of killing. We like it. We don't like studying about virtues. We like studying defects, indulging in those things. So Yama is that bull-headed creature, and it represents how those forces of Keter have fallen into disgrace and become animalized in us, ferocious. So that's why Yama is depicted with this ferocious aspect, out of control. So in the myth of Yama, he is a fallen king, and our inner king is Keter, our innermost, our being, but who's fallen into disgrace because of us. So Yama, the enraged king, is going around Tibet, killing and rampaging in his enraged state. So in order to stop him, another aspect of divinity decides to try to figure out a way to block him from doing this. And he has to come up with a very smart way to do it. Because this is the god of death who's taking the very power of the whole wheel, all manifested existence, in his claws in order to kill everything. So to accomplish this, Manjushri, which is here, which is an aspect of the being, decides to take on the very same form as Yama, but multiplied. Where Yama has one head, Yamantaka has many. Where Yama has a few arms, depending on the depiction, Yamantaka has many more. So he comes at Yama as Yama, but more powerful. He terrifies Yama with himself. He puts a mirror in Yama's face and says, "Look at yourself." And Yama is conquered. So this beautiful myth is teaching us how to perform mystical death, how to conquer our own Bhavachakra and turn that power towards liberation. Now in this image, we see that Yamantaka is with his consort, who's called Vajravitali. So we see God and goddess, father and mother. In other words, an Elohim. Vajravitali means indestructible corpse. Curious term, isn't it? But if you think about it, if you analyze it, if you meditate on it, the meaning's very beautiful. Vajravitali is an aspect or a manifestation of Sarasvati, who is the wife of the innermost, the being, Keter. Sarasvati is the bringer of all good things, the bringer of beauty. In order to aid Yamantaka in conquering Yama, she takes form as Vajravatali, this wrathful shape. In other words, she is Maya. She is the corpse. She is all things that are manifested, that appear to be alive, but are not. All things that appear to be real, but are not. We look at each other, and we think we're all real, and we think this is permanent and will last. It will not. Each person that we become identified with, we look at them, and we judge them, and we analyze them, and we give them many attributes in our mind, all of which we invented. We don't know those people at all. But we invent many things and project them on people, places, and things, when in reality, everything is impermanent and will die. We forget that. She is that. She is the arising and passing of all things. She is the birth, life, and death of everything. She is an indestructible corpse. She is how nature emerges, sustains, and passes away. She is the fundamental ground of existence. She is the wife of Yamantaka. She is our Divine Mother. She and he symbolize perception of reality. When you awaken, little by little, you start to penetrate the veil of Isis, which no mortal can penetrate, but an immortal can. And what is immortal is your consciousness, your Tathagata Garbha, your Buddha nature. It can penetrate the veil. It can see the body of Sarasvati, Vajravatali, and see that corpse dancing as nature. Beautiful, but impermanent. And in that vision, you recognize that she is an embodiment of love, performing her dance to aid us towards liberation. But beings don't recognize that. We become confused. So all of that is a manifestation of Manjushri. This image represents Manjushri. Manjushri is one of the symbolic forms of the Buddhas. All of these images and names are symbolic forms. Many people fall into the mistake of taking them literally. They do have a literal existence, so to speak, but that is unimportant. What's important is what they indicate in our own selves. Manjushri represents the cumulative wisdom of all the awakened beings in existence. Imagine that. If you're studying any kind of spirituality, then you must, to some degree, make an assumption that there are those who have achieved it, who have returned, who have escaped suffering, and thus they have wisdom, knowledge. So if you accept that, and then imagine all of them, and imagine all of their minds as one thing, that is Manjushri. That's what Manjushri represents. The mind of the Buddhas. All of them. Manjushri is not one being. Manjushri represents Christ as wisdom. You see, in the Gnostic tradition, when we study Christ, we're not studying a person, we're studying an energy. In that energy, there is no I. There is we. It's a very high level of nature. And in that state, which you can call the clear light, is a profound cognizance that sees reality, that does not become confused by forms, but sees the ground of forms, the basis of forms, the truth. So Manjushri represents discriminative perception, which in Sanskrit is called prajna. We described that in a previous lecture. Prajna is the highest of the paramitas, or perfections. It is the ability to see the absolute. And that ability of perception is indistinguishable from perfect compassion. That's what Manjushri represents. The sword, in this particular representation, he has a sword. It's the most common. So you see it in this one too. The sword represents that perception that cuts through appearances. Cuts through Maya, Yama. Cuts through the I and sees reality. It does not see through a veil. It cuts the veil. It sees the truth. This is not philosophical. This is not imaginative. It is to see in the same way that you're seeing now, but to see beyond physicality, to see beyond time, beyond the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth dimensions, and to see all of them simultaneously in the ground of the zero dimension, the seventh, which is the absolute, the emptiness, shunyata. In other words, is to see the two truths at the same time without any confusion. To see relative and ultimate reality simultaneously at the same time, imbibed with incredible compassion. Because in that vision, one recognizes that no one else can see what you see. This is the vision of a Buddha, a well-developed Buddha. So the story that I've told you is how the wisdom of the Buddhas, the wisdom of the awakened ones, takes form as Yamantaka to conquer Yama. Now all that is in us. Manjushri represents the totality of the wisdom of our own inner Buddha. In other words, this form is inside of us. It is an archetype, a blueprint of what in us needs to develop. Each time we utilize our consciousness and we acquire knowledge, real knowledge, not something we read in a book, but something through our experience that we learn and see and perceive and know as real. We acquire cognizance, conscious knowledge. It's called in Sanskrit, jna. And that's the same as gno, know, of gnosis. In Sanskrit, jnana, knowledge. In Greek, gnosis. That's what's represented in this book, floating on a flower from Manjushri's other hand. That book is the knowledge that our innermost acquires through the use of that discriminative perception. Awakened consciousness that cuts through illusion to see reality. This is what we need to acquire death. To conquer Yama, we need knowledge. So this is a process. There are stages. It would be great if we could just say, sign me up, and we just get killed. And then we're liberated. Doesn't work like that. Nothing in nature works like that. First, we have to learn what are the causes of suffering. The first phase of the stages of death is discovery. We have to see for ourselves how we are creating suffering. We have to see our own ego in action as it acts, as it works, in our mind, in our heart, in our body. What it says, what it feels, what it thinks, how it acts, what it wants, how it manipulates us, how it takes control of us, what feeds it, what stimulates it, what incites it. We have to know all of that. Think about it. If you're in a war and you're facing Not only your death, but the death of everyone you love. And then you find out there's a traitor, a spy. And the war is so close to being lost already, and now there's a traitor. How are you going to catch him? How are you going to find out who it is? You're going to have to watch everybody equally, without prejudice, without preference, because you don't know who it is. It could be your sister, your brother, your mother. It could be your best friend. You don't know. So you have to watch everybody all the time. This is how you have to watch your mind. All the time, watching your thoughts, your feelings, your impulses, your reactions, and study them. Study how they function, how they connect to each other, what causes different things to rise up. What are you wanting? What are you avoiding? What are you craving? What are you ignoring? What are you willfully not seeing? You need to learn all of those things, because those are the things that have kept you suffering and kept you in the dark and have you at the brink of losing the battle, losing the war. Time is short. This phase of discovery is put in motion through self-observation, through constant observance. Scientific observance. Not with any preference, not with any presupposition. I'm putting it this way because as a scientist, or as a private detective rather, if you go into the headquarters looking for the traitor, and you already think it's a certain person, you're going to pay so much attention to that person, you're not going to see anybody else. And the smart traders will always make you think it's somebody else, don't they? Your egos are very smart. Well, they think they're smart, but they're not as smart as God. They're not as smart as the Buddha. They're not as smart as your consciousness. They are mechanical. They can be found out. They can be conquered. But you have to pay attention. You have to be watching them all the time. Through that process of observance, discovery, gradually we acquire understanding. Little by little, we start to put together the pieces of the puzzle. We start to see how they work together and what stimulates them, what incites them, how they behave, how they act, what they cause us to do. Little by little, we start to understand it. Now, here's the important thing. These egos or defects are part of our own mind. We made them. They have inside of themselves our energy, part of our consciousness. In order for us to be liberated from suffering, those entities have to die. But you can't kill it as long as you're still inside it. Makes sense, right? As long as part of you is still inside of that entity, you really can't kill it. It has to be empty first. To reach the third stage of execution, you first have to take the consciousness out of it. So let's give an example of this. When you become really angry, anger inflames you. It takes over your thinking and your feeling, even your body. You can become tense. You can sweat. You can feel hot. You can feel ready to run and jump, grab somebody, give them a beating, whatever it is that anger wants. Your heart will race and pound. Your mind will race with thoughts of injustice and planning for revenge and redemption and exposing the other person so that they suffer the way I'm suffering. Everything that anger Always ones. That state, that bhava, shows you have zero comprehension of that entity, because it has inflamed your three brains completely. You're burning with it. That means no comprehension. That means that ego can't die, because you're feeding it. You're nourishing it with your energy. As you study it, and as that event unfolds, and you work in meditation and self-observation to work on understanding that anger, what it's coming from, why it's there, how you've empowered it, and the suffering that it causes, little by little, those three levels of intensity will decrease. Thoughts, emotions, physical sensation. They will all get less. Until the same type of scene happens that stimulated that anger in the first place, that event happens again, but you don't feel angry. You might feel a little kick, but then you realize, oh, why should I be angry? I really understood this already. I know that I don't need to be angry about this. So the person called me a name. So what? Their name only means something if I agree that it means something. Isn't it true? If my spouse says I'm an idiot, she's right. Why should I be mad? I am an idiot. But if I get angry, it's because I disagree, because of pride. So then I've got anger and pride. But if she says it, I'm like, she's right. Anger is not stimulated. That means that anger is empty. I've recognized the truth of it. I've recognized it. I've seen that anger is nothing. It doesn't bother me. Then that thing can die. I have not fed it. I have not stimulated it. I have not empowered it. I have not protected it. I have exposed it. I have seen through it. It is empty. It is nothing. It can die. So that's the process in synthesis, how we must approach the process of death, psychologically speaking. Now, you'll notice in execution, the actual death of the entity. It says here, with the help of the Divine Mother Kundalini through the wise practice of sexual superdynamics. This is an important factor that unfortunately has not been widely taught to humanity until now. So for many generations, even though this type of knowledge has been available in different forms in different places around the world, the key has been hidden. So you will find teachings now that talk about spiritual birth, that talk about resurrection, that talk about serving others. Sometimes you'll talk about teachings that talk about the death of the ego. Sometimes. Most avoid it. But even amongst the ones that do, they won't tell you actually how to kill it, how the ego can die. Because that knowledge was always restricted. And many of the schools nowadays don't even know it. It's hidden in the scripture. It was the highest of the 9 jhanas, the vehicles of Tantra. The highest is this knowledge. It was only given to those who gradually, through many lifetimes, worked their way up to receiving that teaching. So don't be surprised if you haven't heard it before. These stages of death, by the way, are talked about in the book Revolution of the Dialectic. If you really want to know how to die psychologically and escape suffering, this is the book you need to know. Very deeply and accurately and profoundly explains the process of psychological change. So, let me back up, as I want to explain something. Oh, didn't bring it. In that school of Tantra in which the process of death was taught, there was a tradition, still is a tradition, that represented the process of psychological death in a very profound form of Tantra related to Yamantaka. There are many scriptures related to that, many rituals and initiations that are all very beautiful and useful and good. But unfortunately, most of humanity does not have access to it. Suffice it to say that the process of psychological death is something that we ourselves put in motion through having the right type of bhava, or psychological attitude. That is an attitude that is willing to die, that wants to die as a psyche. This is not an easy attitude to cultivate. It is not easy to embrace death as a path, especially because our culture nowadays is so opposed to the very notion of death. And as a culture, we are fighting with every ounce of energy we've got to avoid death at all costs, to not see the dead, to not deal with death, to avoid death. The truth is that psychological and spiritual liberation is a process of dying, many deaths. The stages of initiation, spiritual initiation, are stages of death. With each genuine initiation, we die psychologically. In the internal worlds, the one who is awakened experiences those processes of death. John the Baptist represented it with his beheading. That is how the I is decapitated, level to level. With each death, a birth happens. With each death, a sacrifice happens. So the three factors are unified. Physically, terrestrially, we don't really need to worry about all that too much. It will happen on its own as we die psychologically. What we need to do is put in motion those three stages of the process of death. First is discovery. You cannot see the reality of things unless you are willing to recognize that you don't already see it. This is the first problem many people have. We think, because we read a book, or we heard some teaching when we were younger, that we already know the truth. We don't. If we know the truth, then we are escaping suffering. If you are putting in motion the real teachings, you are coming out of suffering. You experience genuine change. That is how you measure your spiritual progress. You don't measure it by having fantastical spiritual experiences. They might happen. Good for you. It's irrelevant. Most people in the Gnostic tradition fall into this mistake. They read the beautiful writings of Samael Aun Weor and his descriptions of his many experiences, and the students think, if I'm having experiences like him, then I'm advancing. This is wrong. The way you measure your progress is through your death, psychologically. Through noticing that you are changing profoundly. To notice that you are becoming less, not more. Noticing that your pride is getting whittled down, that your anger is getting stimulated and exposed so that you can work on it, so that your envy becomes visible, so that you can see how it causes suffering. This is not easy. Nobody wants to face their anger, their envy, their pride, and most especially lust. We want to keep that in our pocket for later. It doesn't work like that. Real spiritual progress is measured through your psychological change. Change that only you can see, nobody else. Your family or your friends will come and say, wow, you've changed a lot since you started studying Gnosis. And you go, yeah, I have. I sure have. You don't even see your own pride. You have to be able to measure your own change. You need to cultivate the ability to welcome challenges, difficulties, to stop seeking comfort and praise. The nature of the grasping entity, the I am, is to always seek pleasure, to seek praise, to seek acceptance, to seek the praises of others, the envy of others. We have to invert that. We need a mirror that will show us who we really are, and none of us want to see it. Samael Aun stated a few times, very beautifully, that if any of us were to actually see the totality of who we are, we would go mad. We couldn't transform it. And those who really work seriously to awaken, start to get glimpses of who we really are, it is very uncomfortable. It's awful, actually. These images of Yamantaka and Yama don't do justice. These are actually quite beautiful compared to what you will see in yourself. The horrors that you have made, that are there binding you. So to liberate oneself, you have to be willing to see it. You have to be willing to look yourself in the eye and see the reality. Not easy. So the myth that I explained to you about Yama and Yamantaka gives a clue. And it is the essence of that tantric method. That clue is, in the tantric method, which we don't teach this particular technique, but I'll explain it so you understand it. Those who have gone through the long process of training in Tibetan Buddhism in that particular school learn how to imagine themselves as being Yamantaka. And they cultivate a perspective of being that in order to conquer Yama. So they imagine themselves becoming this wrathful being in order to conquer their own ego. This is a very useful image for us to understand how to approach the process of psychological death. We have to embrace that wrathful aspect that is committed to self-criticism, to self-decapitation, to self-crucifixion. Amongst the Christian traditions, this process of embracing death was also widespread, particularly among certain monastic groups. So you may have heard the phrase memento mori. That phrase has gotten different interpretations over time, but it originated in a group that knew that the process of psychological change, spiritual change, came through psychological death. So they would remember death, remember dying, as a way to stimulate themselves to not feel complacent with their lust and their pride and their envy and their greed and gluttony and laziness, but to be constantly watchful for the subtle tricks that the ego uses to keep us feeding it. So moving ahead, in order for us to succeed in this third phase of the process of death, once we have discovered how our defects are manipulating us and causing suffering, and then we've comprehended a defect, and we're ready for it to be eliminated, we need to know how to do it. The mind cannot slay itself. We need an executioner. We need that sword of Manjushri to decapitate the ego. That sword is the Kundalini itself. It is a fire, an energy, the intelligence of the Divine Mother. It is the embodiment of prana in us. It is the fire of creativity, of creation, the shamayim that flows in us as Shekinah. Those are Hebrew words, if you don't know them already. That force resides in our sexual glands. And this is why the monks and nuns began as beginners restraining that energy. And once trained, they learned to harness that energy and direct it towards eliminating the ego. So the beginners worked as singles, and once they were trained, those who were prepared entered into a relationship as a couple in order to harness the forces of the couple, to combine the two polarities and direct that energy to liberate the consciousness. This is the meaning of Tantra. The real meaning. It isn't to indulge in desire. It's to die. To liberate the consciousness from its cage. Unfortunately, that's been misused and misinterpreted over the propagation into the West. So the beginners in all the different traditions would learn techniques which in Sanskrit are called pranayama. This image is from Hindu Tantra, and it represents one variation on a practice of pranayama. So we see a yogi who is controlling the airflow in and out of his nostrils. This is a breathing technique in order to work with energy, not physical air, but prana, the energy that's outside and inside. But the primary activator of this technique is the sexual energy that the yogi has learned to restrain. There are a lot of people now around the world who are learning techniques of pranayama but don't learn to restrain their sexual energy. They're wasting their time. It's like using a bellows on a cold hearth. If there's no spark in the coals, no fire will emerge. The spark that produces spiritual life is the same spark that produces physical life. It is sexual energy. To the conservation and transmutation of that energy, one can awaken consciousness rapidly. Without that restraint, we only have death. The wrong kind of death. So pranayama, literally interpreted, means harness the life force. Prana refers to life force, and ayama means to restrain or harness. But I want to point out some additional meanings here. The Sanskrit word prana can mean breath of life, breath, filled, full, wind, spirit. Exactly like neshama in Hebrew. If you remember in the book of Genesis, the Elohim breathed into Adam the breath of life, neshama, and Adam became a living being, nefesh haya. This is how the soul is created. We don't have a soul. We have the embryo of a soul. For that soul to become bhava, we need this prana. We need the breath that comes into us through Elohim. Elohim is the union of male-female. It is the yabyum. It is those two principles united in the sexual act that bring the breath of life. That's the prana that we harness in the sexual act. So prana can also mean vigor, life, power, air, vital organ, vital air, respiration, vitality, energy, etc. Now, what's interesting about this is if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that pranayama has yama in it, the god of death. Our own inner yama. So ayama means restraining, stretching, stopping, extending, breadth, or length. But if we look at that as prana yama, we see death, life. Two sides of the same coin. We see breath of death, power of death, vital organ of death, vital air of death, vitality and energy of death, spirit of death. Very interesting. What's interesting about that is that the technique of pranayama has multiple functions. Traditionally, there are many varieties of pranayama, but they all boil down to simply this. One learns to visualize and imagine as one draws in the atmosphere, the air through the nose, that one also draws the sexual energy up from the sexual organs, up the spine to the brain. And holds it. That's the restraint. So one is taking the energy around and the energy within and pulling it all together. And then from this place, one directs it to what needs to be worked on. The most common technique of pranayama we use here is that energy is directed to the heart, to stimulate and awaken the heart, because our hearts are cold. Some versions of that technique circulate and utilize that force along with mantra while the practitioner is visualizing their meditation. Visualizing that ego that needs to be destroyed, that needs to be understood. So that energy that's being harnessed is being a vital force to empower the imagination, to give us insight, to be the flames that wrap around the sword of Manjushri, that sexual energy that awakens the consciousness to give us the vision of discriminative awareness to cut through the illusion, to see the reality. So the pranayama is used as a technique to help the comprehension of the ego and also its execution. So this technique is very important. In this tradition, we teach several different varieties of it. Oops. 1 second. I hit the wrong button. There we go. This is Yamantaka. So in that tradition of Tantric Buddhism related to Yamantaka, the practitioners would visualize themselves as being Yamantaka and do practices, types of pranayama, breathing combined with mantras, where they visualize being this entity, conquering their ego. What is all this under the feet? The egos, our own egos. Many defects that we have. What are these heads in a necklace? Those are the beheaded eyes, the defects that must die in us. What are the serpents? They are the serpents that entwine on our spinal column. What are the eyes, the many heads of Yamantaka? It is his all-seeing perception that sees in all directions and sees all things and is not confused. So this represents how these energies are united, harnessed, and transformed to help us destroy the ego. The fire, of course, is the sexual energy that inflames the process and brings light. As we explained in the previous lectures, the process of the Bhavachakra is a ever-turning cycle, which is our own mind. And we find that continual turning of the wheel is our experience from moment to moment, which in the West is symbolized as the sign of infinity. That sign of infinity over the body represents just the continual flow of energy through our three brains. We are continually experiencing thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the body, but without any real awareness of what they are, where they come from, where they go, and ultimately what they are producing. That process of energy in motion is symbolized also in Tibetan Buddhism as a vajra. So that symbol on the right-hand side is called a vajra, which means thunderbolt. It is the same thunderbolt used by Indra and Zeus. It is the power that the being has to conquer the demon, to wield the power of a god. That power is in us. It's in our three brains. But we misuse it. We're always misusing the brain, the heart, and the sexual organs, using them to feed desire, to chase pleasure, to fool ourselves with our many illusions, to constantly grasp at an identity that is not real. But if we learn to invert that, to sacrifice that, and instead become our own enemy, to conquer ourselves, to deny the ego its food, to deny pride and deny anger and deny envy, and instead affirm the Buddha inside, the being. To learn to just be instead of always wanting. That power can be utilized. We can have this power in our hands in order to liberate ourselves and ultimately be of benefit not only to ourselves but to others. Now, what's interesting is that as a single person, that is a great deal of power to have. Really. And if you look back through history and you find those individuals who utilized their power effectively for the benefit of others, they can make enormous changes and help many people. Any one of us has that same ability. We simply don't want to. But if we choose to do it, we can. However, if we work together, the power is even greater. This image is of Vajrasattva. Vajra, of course, is that thunderbolt. Sattva is being or essence of. This is Vajrasattva united. Man, woman. Father, mother. God and goddess. In Hebrew, it's called Elohim. This is a union in purity. United with love. A rejection of lust. A denial of pride. A conquering of envy. A dispersal of fear. It is an irradiating example of the creative power of the gods. Something that we can imitate. Something that can empower tremendous change. This was the great secret protected in all the ancient religions and mystical traditions. Sexual cooperation. Chastity. So this Vajra cross represents that. The union of those forces. How the monk and nun would stop being monk and nun and become husband-wife, priest and priestess, in order to go faster, further, deeper, fighting the ego, awakening. That's why on the cross above Jesus it says Inri, which means Ignesis renascor integer. In death I am reborn intact and pure. So this image of Yamantaka represents that. How the cross of man and woman harnesses those forces to liberate the consciousness from the ego. All of these mysteries are hidden there. In synthesis, there are two ways to approach the process of death, whether as a single person or as a couple. The single person can harness their sexual forces and form that crossing in themselves through their own work inside, the cross of death. But they can only accomplish so much because that energy only has so much power. The power to create life, the power to bring life into the world is the power of the man and the woman working together. So that same power can be harnessed and utilized to purge the mind of all of its defects completely. That's the mystery that was hidden in all the ancient traditions. So we should then emulate this example of Yamantaka to show death to itself in order to conquer it. Do you have any questions? Is this related to the lecture?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In the book You Are Here, he talks about how you should not set your mind as a battlefield, right? And that we are anger, we are hatred, but we also love and loving kindness. talks about how anger pops up to treat it like taking a baby from a crib, right? He's got a mantra for you saying, it's like, dear one, I know you're there. Dear one, I'm here for you, right? And then in Shantideva, in the Bodhicitta Vitara, right, Shantideva sets the mind back on itself, right, and battles it throughout his whole verses, right? So where is there something I'm missing? Is it each his own?
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. So the first example that you gave is of a teacher who teaches Sutrayana level Buddhist teachings. So those are the foundational level teachings, which are the introductory stages, where a student is learning, firstly, how to utilize consciousness to maintain constant awareness. And they utilize working with karma and learning about impermanence and the inevitability of death. So the practice that you're describing there is of that class of teaching. The second example you gave, which appears to contradict it, in which the person does battle against the elements in the mind, from Shantideva, is related to the Mahayana level, which is the next grade up. And in that level of teaching, the student should already have formed the foundation level understanding. They already know how to be consistently cognizant and awake from moment to moment. They already understand the process of karma and the inevitability of death. So then they're better prepared to maintain a steadfast self-awareness as they engage in battle against the ego. Okay, makes sense? So you've got two different stages of work. First is preparation. Second, they're entering into battle. Today's lecture is from the third level, from the Tantrayana level, in which the student already has the foundational level. They don't forget. They have an understanding of the basics. They know how to be continually aware of themselves and not lose and become distracted. They also already know how to engage in battle based on the longing to help others, to develop bodhicitta. But they need to go faster. They need to work harder and go deeper. So that in the Tantrayana level, you actually become the enemy. You no longer seek to separate yourself. Right? So in the earlier levels, the student says, well, I'm me over here, and you're the ego over there. Right? The middle level, the student is starting to say, well, okay, I'm going to engage in this battle. But ultimately, both of us are empty. But in the third level, the student says, I am no different from the ego. We are both empty. I am that ego, and I'm going to die. So you see how that's different? Each level of instruction is different. In Gnostic tradition, we teach all three. It depends on the level of the student. So in the lectures and the books, we jump back and forth because it depends on which aspect of the doctrine we're addressing. Depends on, this is the tricky part for the student, is that you have to be able to gauge what you're capable of and not overdo it. And that's why when I'm explaining the lectures, I try to keep those distinctions clear. You need to first build the foundation. You need to first learn how to self-observe, how to be consistent, not forget, to be here and now, to be present, never forgetting. That can only be developed if you're working all day long in self-observation, but you're also practicing meditation every day. Little by little, you develop that capacity of concentration so that you do not forget that you are here and now in the body. From that stage, those deeper techniques can really be utilized effectively. Previous to that, they're only confusing. So that's why in today's lecture I was giving kind of an overview, but not going too deep into the details of how to do each part. Because the student has to gauge that. That book, Revolution of the Dialectic, beautifully outlines these things. But he's way more cryptic than me. He's a master. Any other question?
In Egypt, is the twins,
Horus and Set, yeah.
Set is the god of death and drought, famine.
Mm-hmm. All the Egyptian symbols are reflections of these same symbols. They're all pointing at archetypes that are inside of you. The real question is, who are you in relation to them? Which type of archetype are you reflecting in your day-to-day life? Horus or Set? We're all being Set, betraying Horus, vying for power. So we need to change that. We need the help of Anubis. We need the help of Yamantaka or John the Baptist, whichever symbol you want to apply there. The symbols are really irrelevant. They're just symbolic. It's like taking the flag for the country. They're not the same thing. What matters most is a deep and constant self-reflection. Am I changing? Am I not? Any other questions? In the back?
In the bigger picture, are we intellectual animals one of the slivers of the multifaceted aspects of Yamantaka?
Are we as the ego?
In the bigger picture, we as intellectual animals, one of the slivers of the multifaceted.
Okay, so the question is, are we as intellectual animals one of the slivers of the image of Yamantaka? No. We as intellectual animals are Yama. We are our own process of death. We as a consciousness, as a being, that part of us that we don't yet know, are Yamantaka. The being is Yamantaka. So this image, this final image here, is Yamantaka, our being. In order for us to conquer the ego, we need to become a reflection of that. The only way to achieve that is to cut through the illusion of being an intellectual animal. Cut through our illusions of what we think we are, who we think we are. We need to instead learn to be, to awaken, to learn to see, to develop the type of discriminative perception that's so powerful that we literally start to peel away the veils that cloud us. Anybody can do that. This is not a game. This is not philosophical debate. These teachings are not a joke. This science is a way of awakening consciousness. And to awaken consciousness means to develop perception, different perception. You will actually see. It will not be like you've seen in movies. It will not be like it's in comic books and books of fantasy and all that stuff. It is not like that. It is another way of seeing. It is a way of restoring the natural state of the consciousness, which is a form of perception. Don't confuse the symbols, the paintings, the drawings, the terms, the names, the mythologies with the facts. Work with the facts. The facts are, we are here, we are now, we are asleep. We are trapped and bound in suffering. There is a way out, but the only way out is to awaken. It isn't through memorizing mythologies and comparing symbols and studying graphics. The way is through awakening. And the way to truly awaken is to die psychologically. It is to kill your pride. For it, when it comes up, to not protect it. When your lust comes up, to not avoid it, to not protect it, to not indulge in it, to not repress, to see it. To see that it is a form of suffering. And then to want to escape that. And the only way to escape it is to get to learn how the cage was built. To see every joint, every connection, and to learn to start cutting them. To stop feeding it, empowering it, and making it stronger, but instead to start breaking it down. That's how you do it. You don't need to remember any of these symbols, any of these names, any of it. Forget it. It won't save you. What will liberate you is to escape from your pride. Come out of it. Discard it, like the way a serpent discards a skin. We need to escape pride, anger, envy, fear, gluttony, greed, laziness, all of it. They have to die. They are not real. They are not our real self. They are self-created illusions. Another question back there.
What would you suggest to do when the consciousness gets tired from intense self-observation?
What to do when the consciousness is tired from intense self-observation? Relax. Rest. The student in the beginning needs a great deal of willpower to develop self-observation because that skill is weak in us. Like any muscle, when you start to exercise, it's really hard at first. You might be all enthusiastic for the first week or two, and you're going to go to the gym every day and work out. You're going to do your 2 hours of meditation every day, or whatever it is you've decided. But a few weeks into it, you're wiped out. You're burned out already. The intelligent, balanced way to approach this is to relax. Don't stop, but don't push yourself to exhaustion. Be balanced. Work within your limits. The paintings that show the development of concentration practice, or development of concentration, states of concentration, in Tibetan Buddhism show a great fire at the beginning of that path. And as the student ascends towards higher degrees of concentration, that fire gets smaller and smaller. That fire represents the degree of intensity that the student needs in order to really develop continuity of consciousness. So in the beginning, it takes a lot of force. That's tiring. So the way to accomplish it is to do it in little packets. Work on it, work on it, work on it. But you're going to get tired, so relax. Don't stop paying attention. Just relax. And keep trying and relaxing. And trying and relaxing. And this is how you do it in a balanced way. The problem that happens with a lot of beginners is that as we learn to meditate and self-observe, we're really learning to become tense. Because we have that urgency that wants to learn and wants to get it right. And get it right from the beginning, which is really a kind of pride. Just in case you didn't realize that. What we really need to do is to be relaxed. Genuine self-observation is the same as a good state of relaxation where we are here and now. So someone who's really able to observe themselves is not tense. If you're tense, you're not paying attention to something. Tension is a sign of mental tension. Some kind of resistance in the mind, in the heart. So when you feel tense, physically, emotionally, or mentally, you're not noticing something. You didn't transform some impression. You're either resisting something or grasping something psychologically. And so that reflects in us physically. So learn to relax along the way. Another question?
Is it fair to assume that you're not heading in the right direction if your life is full of joy? So in essence,
Okay. Is it safe to assume you're not headed in the right direction if your life is full of joy?
so in essence, without suffering.
Well, what we have to understand is that our life is a reflection of our karma. So someone who's experiencing a life filled with joy needs to analyze that joy. Is it real joy? Is it lasting joy? Or is it joy that's based in some type of materialistic state? If our joy is because we have a good family and we have money in the bank and we have decent health, you're fooling yourself. So none of those things will last. If you can be poverty-stricken, have no money, have no food, and be totally joyful and happy, then we could talk about that. You might be doing the right thing. The natural state of the consciousness is a state of joyfulness, but it does not depend on anything outside of itself. It is a state of absolute serenity and peace and love, but it doesn't depend on getting praise, and it doesn't care about getting blame, and it doesn't care if it's rich or poor, if it's sick or healthy. The natural state of the mind simply is. Unfortunately, we've lost touch with that. When you learn to self-observe and you learn to meditate, you will start to get in touch with it. And that is what empowers you to go forward. So on that note, I want to point out something about the process of self-observation, meditation, and the eventual elimination of the ego. This embracing of death and the idea of seeking to die psychologically can sound really morbid. It isn't. It's actually beautifully joyful. But we need to understand how that is. Because unfortunately, with the mind that we have, we can misinterpret that. For example, in some traditions, the priests or lamas would wear bones and use human bones in the rituals. And Westerners see that and are horrified and think it's black magic. Sometimes it is. But the genuine meaning of that tradition is profoundly reverential, and it's to show that we ourselves are empty. Life and death is an illusion. We will all die. We've all died before. We will die again. Life is in transit. It's a constant process of change. And when you really come to terms with that, you become freed of the fear of death. Moreover, you can start to see how to take advantage of death and utilize it to benefit yourself and others. So death doesn't become a fearful thing. It becomes a source of change. Psychologically speaking, in relation with self-observation and meditation, we need to understand that. The Gnostic tradition, from the guidance of Samael and Vior, focused very intensely on the death of the ego. And this is necessary. But students who are new, or even old ones, read the books and they become very morbid. And they think, this is all about death. It's so depressing. It's so dark. It's so hateful and angry. But they don't understand the philosophical point of view. It's actually not hateful, not angry. It's not morbid. It's liberating. When you actually engage in your own practice, if you approach your practice simply as my ego must die, and this is your constant perspective, you will become morbid. And eventually, you will abandon this type of work, because that approach on its own cannot render the kind of change we need. We need the unity of those three factors: birth, death, and sacrifice. So as an example, if you're working on anger, and you had some experience during the day that really made you mad, and you went through that experience and you were able to see all that anger and all that emotional and mental and physical information. And then you go home to meditate. And you relax and you do your prayers, you do your mantras, and you begin to visualize that event to try to understand it better. But you become angry again. You're unable to release the attachment to the anger. There's a danger there that you can grow it, that you can strengthen the anger. And many people fall into that. And this is normal. It's not easy to learn to separate oneself and actually cognizantly do battle with it and overcome it. But a great antidote, a way to do it, is to use the mirror. When you observe and you remember that scene and you are seeing, I was so angry and he did this and that to me and there was and I don't deserve it. You have to use a mirror against yourself and show yourself that anger and look and see how ugly you are when you're angry. And see how ugly that anger is. And see how that anger is only going to produce suffering. And then turn it against itself. Look at how that anger should have been. Really, anger is the inverse of love. Because anger is just hate. Anger wants others to suffer. If you really look at it clearly, that's all anger wants. It wants to make others suffer the way we feel we've suffered. But if you turn that against itself and you say, well, if that's so, how would I handle that if I were to actually show love? So you need to meditate on both sides. Not just the side of that sees just the anger, but you need to see what would be the virtue. What would be the right behavior? See, in this way, you don't become morbid. Then you start to see there's hope. If you're only focused on the dark side, I have so much anger, I have so much pride, I have so much lust, you'll really become self-defeatist and morbid and unhappy and be frowning all the time, and nobody will want to be around you. All the Gnostics complain about that. I've lost all my friends. You might. Hopefully you'll gain better ones. But it's important to have balance in our practice. See both sides. Any other questions back there?
Yeah.
Okay.
In doing the work, at times the energy becomes so great that it explodes forth, usually in a negative way, through pride, rage, lust, etc. How do we avoid these explosions when we become overwhelmed by the extra energy that we stored up? But rather direct slowly and steadily into a positive stream that feeds rather than consumes. Although the explosions are wonderful for meditation upon, by that I mean it's horrible and painful. How can we conquer it practically?
Okay, I'm not going to repeat the whole question because it's quite long. The question in essence says, how can we avoid explosions of negative energy as we work through our day-to-day practice? The only way to conquer this phenomena is through experience. It's natural for all students to experience states that we're unable to transform. We're beginners. So we are not yet good at transforming impressions, at handling the diverse experiences of our day-to-day life. And so it's normal and natural for us, given our current state, to repress things and to avoid things and to indulge in things and to make ourselves suffer. So when someone is experiencing a sudden explosion of anger or lust or envy, it's because up to that point they were repressing those things, avoiding those things, or unable to transform the impressions that led to that buildup of energy. For lust, for example, there's a lot of energy tied up in our lust, and if we're not very constantly and consistently aware of ourselves, we are constantly building up a storage of untransformed impressions, and eventually it will come out. Lust especially is dangerous because it can explode as other things. Someone who's learning these techniques, this tradition, learning to transform sexual energy, it's not easy. Especially the first few years. Very difficult because the energy is used to being expressed in a harmful way. So in the beginning, everybody learns to just repress it. And when you repress something, you put it under pressure. Makes sense, right? You're just putting it aside and sitting on it, trying to pack it into something it shouldn't be in. That energy needs to move. It needs to be utilized. So ultimately, that energy will explode out. It can explode as lust, as anger, pride, envy, etc. This happens to everyone. The way to avoid it is to learn more and more about being constantly aware. Constant, watching, and transforming. Do your practices. Do your pranayama. Do your sexual magic, whichever state you happen to be in. Learn to transform that energy. And when you have an explosion like that, meditate. Reflect back on what led to it. You might be surprised. This is how we learn to change. It's painful. This is the only way. Any questions here? Yeah.
So, and you already answered this about joy, but it's work, and it's difficult, and it feels overwhelming, and so we work to develop patience. And patience to wait for that joy to arise is one of the things we have patience for. Is there, and you already answered it, but maybe rephrase it a little bit differently. How do we develop that joy? A positive state, a cheerful state.
The Master Samael wrote in the book Aztec Christic Magic that we have to cultivate the habit of being happy. And I think that's a really important statement. It's very easy to become dark when we analyze ourselves because we see so many problems. And when you really are observing yourself and trying to meditate every day and it becomes overwhelming. Students always ask, how can I pick one ego? Because I see so many egos. And the answer is to meditate on that day. And just meditate as much as you can. If you can't get through everything, start with the most important ones that resonate with your heart, that these are the most important. Meditate on those. And if you're one of those lucky people, I'm joking, who doesn't find an ego that day, You need to pay attention more. You need to look more. Look the day before that. You will find things that need to be worked on. As far as how to sustain the work and have a joyful attitude, this also is through the transformation of impressions. A problem that can happen when we're working so much on the ego is it can become very much about me. I'm working on my ego. My pride is so bad. I am overwhelmed. I am. So that defeatist, morbid, frustrated state is pride. Recognize that. Work with a sense of indifference. None of us have I hope, have an egotistical reaction to brushing our teeth. We just brush them because they need brushing. Our meditation should be the same. We meditate because we must. Not because we're bad or good, but because we need it. And I hope that your practice reaches that point where you realize it's not something that's optional. It's like eating a meal. I need it to continue, to go on. I need it. And in those times when you're feeling deflated or defeated or despondent or those sort of negative emotional states, it's okay to pause in the psychological work in order to rejuvenate oneself. And in those contexts, I would suggest that you meditate on your being and pray. Visualize how incredibly beautiful the being is and work with that as an antidote. The being is incredible. Not only that, but the being in every other person. And when you really start to come out of your cage where it's all about me, and you start to see, well, my being is so amazingly beautiful, but he's got that too. And she's got that. So there's a chance for that to be revealed in everyone. That's not something to be despondent about. That actually should give us a lot of energy to keep working, with a lot of hope. So we need to find those kind of antidotes. For myself, what I try to do when I'm getting in those states is I try to start as a beginner. I generally do that when I meditate anyway, when I sit to meditate. I don't sit to meditate thinking I know what I'm doing, as I really don't. I sincerely don't think I know what I'm doing. So when I sit, I start from that. Where am I? Who am I? What am I doing here? And what can I do to change it? And I test the principles. I go through the steps stage by stage and I test the principles. And that has helped me. So instead of falling into that state, we need to find those antidotes. Was there a question back there? No? In the back?
How often do you suggest we practice pranayama? Also, is it true that you can raise the sexual energy through the chakras by visualizing it rising up?
One can practice pranayama as much as one wants. It's similar to breathing. One needs to breathe. Pranayama is a type of breath, but combined with visualization and mantra in order to transform energy. The sexual energy is constantly being produced in the body, not only physically, but vitally. And so that energy is always building. The more often you work to transform the energy, the more you'll be able to keep it under control. So for pranayama, you can do it as much as you like. For sexual magic, it's another story, once per day at the most. And is it true that you can raise the sexual energy through visualization? Yes, it is true. But in order to do that, you need to have some energy there in the first place. If that energy is already wasted, there's nothing to raise. If you save it, you can raise it. And with experience and with practice, you will be able to verify that for yourself. It's not an illusion. It's something you can experience. Any other question?
No.
Okay. Anything else?
Now, if a person has not learned how to truly to meditate effectively, and they're a beginner, let's say, in terms of the stages of death, is that pretty much, obviously it's most effective in meditation when one has reached that level. But if you haven't reached that level and you're at the beginning, are you going through these stages in your superficial way in terms of on the level you're able to see it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The beginner always begins where the beginner is. the stages still apply. So someone who's beginning in these studies and is working to observe themselves and gather information about the ego and conserving their sexual energy in order to use that energy to defeat those egos, they can defeat egos relative to the amount of energy and comprehension they have acquired. Meaning that as a beginner, the reach and power of that comprehension and energy will be shallow. But there is still progress that can be made. The more you develop, the deeper you can go. If you have not learned to meditate, if someone is working on learning to observe themselves and conserve that energy, and they're working physically on that, they can work on those egos that they can perceive. But that's, of course, only what's being perceived from the physical body. That's the most superficial level. If you really want to get into the depths of the mind, you need to learn to meditate. And by meditation, I mean awaken consciousness and able to perceive other dimensions. Anyone can do that. The consciousness in itself has that capability, but we have to develop it and awaken it and restore it. And in that context, you can work deeper relative to the levels you're able to perceive. And again, in the beginning, it's shallow. But a single person who works very rigorously, with a lot of dedication, meditating hours a day, dedicating all of their energy towards this work, can in a due course of time eliminate a large percentage of the ego, but not the entirety. So they can become what we might call a saint, but they cannot become what we would call a Buddha. To reach that level, you need to work with a partner in sexual cooperation, because that's the only way you can cultivate the vessels that can reflect the radiance of a Buddha and the wisdom of a Buddha, and also penetrate deeper into the ego. So we work in stages. The bottom line is, start where you are, work to the best of your ability, and work to go deeper. Learn to meditate. Meditation is absolutely essential. Without that, this work cannot be accomplished. Bottom line. Any other question? Okay, thanks.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Will you help others to benefit from this knowledge? Most Gnostic schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. Every single donation helps. Make a donation now at gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the books published by Glorian Publishing and available from booksellers worldwide. Visit gnosticbooks.org to learn more. Thank you. May all beings be happy.